My name is Marcus. I'm from Guatemala. My background is in academia, research, climate, the healthcare space, education, among a range of other industries. Generally just really driven by leveraging technology and innovation to create better futures for all. I think the primary challenge that I want to unlock is thinking about the real-world applications of the technology that we're building. So oftentimes, and it's being spoken about a lot today, is we've been lost in the hype and the speculation of what has been built over the course of the last few years, and driving real-world utility and value back to the space. I think is of utmost importance for us to see continuous, an infinite garden ultimately, right? And so thinking of how we can bridge these worlds will be really crucial, and that's the emphasis of the research, is how do we take a lot of the innovation that's happening in the space, particularly looking at decentralized finance, as I believe that's a really important coordination tool, and how do we deploy that in really local contexts, and what's all the infrastructure and the building blocks that need to be put in place in order for that to be a reality. So the question that we've been exploring at Lamina Pop is how do we deliver better livelihoods and access to not just housing, but also water filtration systems, permaculture gardens, energy access, internet access, and do so in such a way that is sustainable and scalable. Primarily right now, the way people have access to housing in Guatemala, for example, is by taking loans. So the problem with these loans that they end up taking out is they have really, really high interest rates, and they can't access them necessarily through traditional financial institutions. And so what ends up happening is they end up having to recur to loan sharks that end up charging hundreds of percentage points on an annual basis of interest rate. So the question is, if we look at decentralized finance, for example, where you can take a loan out for single percentage points, what would it look like, for example, to merge these two worlds together, where we're saying, how does someone in Guatemala in a rural marginalized area get access to a low interest rate loan that is powered by DeFi? I was born and raised in the rural highlands of Guatemala. I used to take a boat into school every day. I used to live in an indigenous village as well. And so it was very close to home to me, the harsh reality that people live in Guatemala, right? So the region that I'm from, 7 out of 10 children face chronic malnutrition. We have some of the highest illiteracy rates in the Americas, some of the poorest healthcare indicators in the region as well. So for me, from a very young age, it's been a really strong passion of mine to address these issues, not just the sort of surface level complexities, but rather thinking about what are the underlying structural problems that exist across society that perpetuate these injustices. So that's ultimately what's unlocked, or a lot of the thought process, and ultimately led me towards Ethereum and thinking about decentralized distributed systems across society, right? Anytime we end up with, and this is particularly poignant in Guatemala, where we have a really, really centralized elitist society that is inhibiting the capacity for people to move upwardly, and therefore we end up with the conditions that we have today. The fact that we have this tool and this mechanism to create better coordination games and systems is incredibly powerful, right? If we can shift away from unequally distributed power systems and towards systems that are much more inclusive, much more participatory, and generally just respect each individual's autonomy in a system, I think is ultimately the underlying infrastructure for us to build an entirely new society that is grounded much more in fair principles and principles that enable anyone, irrespective of socioeconomic status, to be able to rise up.